Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pierre Sabat, policy analyst with the Building Codes Division, and I'm the facilitator for today's Rulemaking Advisory Committee. This is a hybrid hearing being held in person in the main conference room of the State Building Codes Division at 1535 Edgewater Street Northwest, Salem, Oregon, and virtually over Zoom. This RAC is being recorded to maintain a permanent record. Today's date is January 30th, 2024. The time is approximately 1:30 p.m. The purpose of today's Rulemaking Advisory Committee is to assist BCD, or the division, in adopting the 2023 Oregon Residential Reach Code, which is a set of statewide optional construction standards and methods designed to increase efficiency of structures regulated by the Oregon Residential Specialty Code, or ORSC. For today's agenda, I will begin with a short introduction on the background of the Reach Code adoption. After the introduction, we will jump into code proposals, starting with BCD's code proposal review matrix. We will then move on to public proposals. We will discuss potential financial and economic impacts, and potential race equity impacts will also be discussed. Any additional topics and next steps will be discussed at the end of the meeting. For my short introduction, I'll start with Executive Order 2004. And this was passed in 2020 by the governor, which directs state agencies to take actions to reduce and regulate greenhouse gas emissions. EO 2004 has specific requirements for the division. It requires the division to, through its advisory boards, evaluate and report on Oregon's current progress towards achieving the goals for new residential and commercial buildings and options for achieving that goal over the next 3 code cycles, followed by submitting a report on the current progress every 3 years afterward. Additionally, it requires the division, through the advisory boards, to adopt building energy efficiency goals for 2030 for new residential and commercial construction, representing a 60% reduction in new building annual site consumption of energy from the adopted 2006 Oregon codes. Lastly, it requires the division, through its advisory boards, to evaluate and report on Oregon's current progress towards achieving the goals for the new residential and commercial buildings and options for achieving that goal over the next 3 code cycles. Next, we'll jump into ORS 45500, which requires the division, in consultation with its appropriate advisory boards, to adopt, amend, and administer a code separate from the state building code to be known as the Reach Code. The Reach Code is a state, like I said, the Reach Code is a set of statewide optional construction standards and methods that are economically and technically feasible, including any published generally accepted codes and standards newly adopted for construction or for the installation of products, equipment, and devices designed to increase energy efficiency in buildings that are newly constructed, reconstructed, altered, or repaired. Technical review shall consider changes necessary to address the federal, state, and local financial incentives. The Residential Reach Code is a statewide optional pathway for builders, consumers, contractors, and others to use for the design and construction of structures regulated by the ORSC. Local municipalities must allow for the use of the Residential Reach Code. This brings us to House Bill 3409. Prior to House Bill 3409, the BCD adopted a Reach Code, but in the 2023 legislative session, House Bill 3409 made it so that the Reach Code, which does include today's Residential Reach Code, must be adopted by rule with the approval of the appropriate advisory boards each time the applicable base code is updated. The division, in consultation with the approval of these appropriate advisory boards, amended OAR 918-4640, satisfying design and construction of structures regulated by the ORSC. The amended rule went into effect on January 1, 2024. As stated previously, the base code for the Residential Reach Code is the ORSC, and the division has established through rule that once the ORSC is forwarded to the administrator by the appropriate board, the process for adopting an updated Residential Reach Code begins. The 2023 ORSC became effective on October 1st, 2023, and the Residential Reach Code adoption process began with a public code amendment proposal from October 16th through December 18th, 2023. That brings us to today. That concludes my background introduction for today's Rulemaking Advisory Committee. I will pass it to Mark Heiser for additional comments and information, and then we will move forward to the BCD's proposal with their matrix. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. For the record, Mark Heiser, Energy and Mechanical Engineer with the Building Codes Division. Appreciate everyone attending today to discuss the 2023 Residential Reach Code that would be above code to the 2023 Oregon Residential Specialty Code Chapter 11. Having come to the division about 13 years ago to be part of the original Reach Code, I want to go over some of the overview of, again, of what we're intending to do today. Of course, the Reach Code is really a outlook to sort of see what might be coming in future codes to align with potentially having incentives that can go with those pieces. And of course, with the new House Bill 3409 and the energy targets, I want to point out that yes, we are looking at the REACH code. Well, we have a target for the 2029 residential REACH code to have a residential code, excuse me, to have a energy provisions in the residential code that are 60% more efficient than our 2005 code. That 60% reduction is, of course, of the regulated loads within the home. What we are looking at as we move through this is, are we maintaining that pathway to the 2029 code, which would sort of look at us being what might be in the 2026 Oregon residential code, seeing how that aligns with incentives, and of course, looking at costs and how that might work for its cost effectiveness to be brought into future code. Having been here for the original REACH code, again, just sort of a reminder of one of the things that was discussed years ago was that, this set of standards is something that's readily available. It should be based on or looking at model codes, things that are published today, and that a city would always encourage the use of the REACH code through incentives to the builders. So once upon a time, there's always, if you're going to, as little as if you use the REACH code, reduce FARs or faster permitting process or working with fees. So that has always been one of the intents of the REACH code as well. What we have today for the baseline draft is really a starting point looking at taking the 2023 code updates and blending them with, excuse me, the previous REACH code. And the document has sort of three pieces in it. Pink is existing language bringing forward from the 2021 REACH code. Anything that's bold blue underline is new work, and anything that's red strike through is something that was added or deleted, primarily based on the 2023 residential REACH code. And if it's shaded, these are things that changed in the code from the 2023 residential specialty code, chapter 11. I do have two side notes for this before we begin. One is concerning section N1105.6, and this was my overview. Oversight was that we brought forward the language from the ventilation fan efficiency for what we would normally refer to as CFIS, using the furnace for the outdoor air ventilation. That was actually superseded in the 2021 residential REACH code under section NM 1112. So what is in section N1105.6 that's in the gray highlight would be scratched out. The second piece would be that the set blower door ceiling results in section N1104.8.2. We put in 3.25 air changes per hour for test results that came from the 2023 code. We would be looking to, for the final, to have 3 air changes to align with model code. That's for an advanced code. 3.0 is very similar to the results that are happening through program homes, and that would be the target we would look for in section N1104.8.2 as a 3.0 air change at 50 pascals. That's result. So to move into the document again, it's sort of a blend of the two previous codes to sort of bring forward what we put into the new 2023 residential standard code, and also sort of looking what we had in the previous REACH code, bringing them forward. There were a lot of changes in the 2023 code that helped inform the 2023 REACH code. When we go through costs and cost savings, done a good look at where the percentages are and between the several paths. We'll go through that in a second. It looks like we're pretty much on target for maintaining that slope to the 2029 House Bill 3409 target. One thing that, so I guess, do we want to bring up the current, let's bring up the code language and we'll go through the draft first and we'll bring it up on the screen if we can. Yes, the residential reach code draft. I think, yes, Laura's running that for us. Thank you, Laura. And we can go, what is on the screen right now is the matrix for the document. We can show that, yes. Of the items that, the big ones that we wish to show are, of course, item 1, looking at the additional measures that are required. This does add one extra additional measure. Under item 1, if you are continuing, just like we do under the 2023 residential specialty code, if you are deeply burying the ducts and taking the exception under item 2, you do have to bring in one additional measure at that point. One item from the item number 3 brings forward from the existing reach code, the walls are changing from a U 0.59 to 0.57, which is effectively looking to go from a R21 intermediate framing wall to go to an advanced framing wall. That would mean 16-inch on center stud spacing for the reach code. Or there are paths using different stud depths and different amounts of potentially continuous insulation on the exterior wall. We do add the SHGC values are required under item 4 for windows. That was a request from the last time, and I do believe that's gone into the basic code as well. For advanced framing, again, item number 5, that is our baseline method. You can do trade-off and look at other methods for doing framing for the walls. And there are, of course, trade-offs. You can trade off, use the same trade-off table under section and 1104 point, excuse me. Let me get my table again. This table N1104.1 per N1, that trade-off methodology is still available. Again, under the ceiling, just like in existing reach code, there is a requirement for testing. There, under item 8, there's a requirement for testing of ductwork that's outside of the thermal envelope. So if it's deeply buried, it does require testing. Again, bigger item, let's here as we're going, that's items 8, 9, and 10, essentially. Under section 11, the existing reach code had the application of the We Stand Advanced Plumbing Code. Was the 2017 version. We'll see that there's a proposal later to go with the most recent edition. Under table N1109.1, one of the methods to comply would be to use the ERI path, which is now in our energy rating index compliance path, which is also in our residential code now. We do not have numbers set yet because we do want to wait until final work today to align what the targets would be with trying to match either the prescriptive or the Energy Star path to get to a number that's aligns with other pathways. Again, noting section NM1112 about mechanical ventilation. Again, that's back to central furnace integrated system. Mechanical ventilation does provide a fairly significant recognized energy penalty. So this is requiring that the ventilation intake fan and exhaust fan do need to be independent of the furnace. So that was from the previous reach code. With that, if we could bring up just the alternative compliance paths, page 1 of the document, We are looking at alternative compliance paths of both using the ERI version, which aligns with National Model Code for how they do. They have it as an additional performance path. We also have incorporated using the Energy Star compliance path. We need to add a little language for this, but the ERI Energy Star path, of course, would be version 3.2 national, which is going to become the standard nationally starting January 1 of 2025. And it will align with the current Energy Star federal incentives to builders of $2,500 per home. We also mentioned the ZERH, US DOE Zero Energy Ready Home Program, which has moved forward starting at the beginning of this year, and it has a $5,000 incentive. And with that, we just wanted to point out that that is a potential secondary path, maybe having a phase 1 and a phase 2 version of increasing efficiency. And we'll discuss that in more detail when we get into some of the proposals. So if there are any questions for the division, I'd be happy to take those now, and then we will go into the public proposals.
Thanks, Mark. As you stated, if there's any comments or questions regarding BCD's proposed provisions, please feel free to chime in. Thank you. Yes, go ahead, Kevin. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for convening this meeting. I had a question on the Zero Energy Ready Home provisions. Is that based on version 2, revision 1?
Thank you. Yes, Kevin Markheiser for the division. Yes, that is the latest version that is available now and will be available, I believe, for at least 3 more years, if not 4, under the starts. Yes. All right. 2.1 is okay, but it would be the one that would be the next most efficient level that's coming out. I apologize for not having the exact number here, but that would be just like the version 3.2. It would align with the incentives that are still going to be available by the time a reach code project is constructed. So
That makes sense. And I forgot to identify myself as Kevin Dwell, Northwest Natural.
thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. I see David's hand up.
Yeah, thank you. This is David Heslom from Earth Advantage and on the Zero Coalition Policy Committee. I just wanted to make sure I was understanding the where we're at. So, and it did the provisions that you were describing, Mark, that are coming from the division. I at the very beginning I heard mention of where things were at, but is there modeling and backup information associated with the BCD proposed provisions in the table here, similar to the backup documentation that was requested of third-party proposers?
Yes, we do. And we've just had an update to the RemRate software. So we're redoing a couple of pieces in it, but yes, that is available.
Oh, so is it part of the packet? Because maybe I just didn't find it in there.
It is not in the specific packet today. No, sir. We can have that posted though.
Okay. Then will you be giving us like a verbal of what you think it is, so we just hold that in comparison with when we go through the third party proposals?
So the first round, I believe that we have, so for the average change for if using Energy Star, it's about a 12.64 Energy savings, I believe that's the correct number that we're looking at. Sort of using the same weighted average, plugging it into the table.
Uh-huh. So the Energy Star one was 12.6 using that weighted average methodology. Okay. And then was the zero energy ready one a little bit more than that?
Yes. ZERH is getting closer to 18%.
Okay. And I guess the other the revised ERI numbers, was there modeling associated with
We
that route?
generals on a revised ERI, but we're waiting on the final. I'm trying to remember what the general range was of, I'm trying to remember where Energy Star came out. I know we've run a few of them. We didn't rerun the residential, about 52 for Energy Star to 55.
So the ERI values would be in the what you'd be proposing are in the 52 to 55 range. And that represented,
Lower. We would, no matter what we would do, we would have a sort of a round down to make sure that we had a safety factor built in. Probably
okay.
less would be where we would be landing on an ERI path. And there are some changes that are happening in some of the software. So we do want to reconfirm previous and current ERIs in the REM rate software update we just had. We're seeing that there's some minor differences that are coming out of results. So we really want to re-verify everything so that it's aligning with real world results. And we may look to some people to run it under some of the different softwares that are out there to just make sure that results are going to be the same, because we are, I believe, one of the reports we got back from the REM rate convention, is that what it was, Kelly? That they're seeing some differences between some of the software. It's not as close as expected, some of the ERI results. So, yeah, and we can't post that information, David.
Okay. But it is, so in that process, are you targeting a certain percent energy consumption reduction, or is it just or is it an ERI index value reduction that you're targeting?
We are targeting a reduction in overall energy consumption, looking at the regulated loads to at minimum to maintain alignment with what's happening on the, and then seeing where those homes wind up in the ERI target.
So is the percent you're trying to line up with like the same as the Energy Star percent, that 12%? Or is it a particular number, or?
Again, we're waiting to see what the exact numbers will be of the final. What comes out of the meeting today will be where we are intending to put the number at. But the bottom end of where of the weighted buildings coming up with an ERI that is in the line with where ZERH in Oregon, excuse me, not ZERH, where Energy Star in Oregon would be, and where our prescriptive path would be, and coming up with in the lower range end of that range.
Okay.
Unless there are other changes today. That's the other part.
Yeah. Okay. And so one last question, sorry, I'm taking up too much time, but like, so you just mentioned where the prescriptive path would bring us out. So do you have any modeled numbers on where the prescriptive path would bring us out?
That was, I believe, 53. Yeah. Okay. That was a little higher than the ZERH. So again, where the target target ERI would be more in line probably with the Energy Star home. Yeah. Oh, the percentage. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the percent savings from modeling the prescriptive path is
regulated. Yes. But then there are a couple other things we're modifying today, and we're going to we're going to recheck all the numbers.
Right. Okay, so I guess I'm just not hearing it because maybe I said something while you were saying something. But so the percent savings that you think is coming from the prescriptive path is in alignment with the Energy Star path?
A little less, no. It's just a little less currently, but we're rerunning with we have to rerun with the correct air leakage rate and a couple other changes from today. So with the new software, but probably in the 8 to 10% range, depending on what happens when we rerun this again.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, David. I see Jim's hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for your time. Yeah, Jim Edelson, New Buildings Institute. And I have similar questions along where David Hessman was probing. We have seen significant modeling of reach code homes in the low to mid 40s. And my understanding that the DOE modeling of zero energy ready home for climate zones 4 and 5 are potentially in the mid 40 range. So is the intent to find equivalence between the paths, or is it the best of the paths? Where you set the ERI, or is it at the top of the range where you're going to set the ERI? Is there sort of a logic path to how you choose the MBI or choose the ERI?
Current, we are taking the assumptions that we have published and the information and modifying exactly the way the prescriptive is shown in both our code and then also the prescriptive Energy Star code home. We're running them, putting them into the software and looking at the ERI numbers that come out. If other people are seeing them come out lower, we would love to see what they are putting in the assumptions.
Okay. So you're not modeling the zero energy ready home for comparison.
We have modeled the zero energy ready home, yes.
Okay. So are all your values going to be published, your analysis?
We can republish the assumptions and the results, yes.
Okay.
And we'd love to see how people are getting to the low 40s.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any?
And Jim, it would, Mark Heiser with the division, one more time, it would be good to know which of the softwares they're using, because again, it came up in San Diego that there are some differences. So we do want to make sure everything's being compared apples to apples on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And I provided you with the Pacific Northwest National Labs modeling of the homes, and I will provide that again with their software. So thanks.
Thanks, Jim. Are there any other questions or comments for Mark regarding BCD's provisions? Hearing none, we will move on. But if someone wants to ask a question regarding our proposal, you can always jump back. Well, we can always revisit it. But at this moment, we'll move forward with public proposals. I would like to ask Mr. Jed Sherman to come up and for representing IATMO and talk about the first proposal.
Good day, everyone. I am Jed Sherman with the IATMO Group. Pleased to be here today. And my proposal is that we adopt the latest version of the 2020 WE stand. 2017 was adopted in the previous edition of the Oregon Reach Code. IATMO is very committed to conservation of water and energy. And the WE stand is a document, an ANSI standard that minimizes the use and conservation of water. Sustainability and public health are not exclusive goals, they are compatible goals. And this latest edition of the WE stand incorporates the latest technologies the latest innovations in providing for things like on-site reuse, gray water, black water, storm water, and so forth. The water demand calculator is a part of the We Stand document. The water demand calculator's goal is to right-size water piping systems, which minimizes water age, reduces the possibility of stagnation and things like Legionella and so forth. And so I recommend that the state of Oregon update the REACH code to the latest edition of the 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. Are there any comments or questions for Jed? Nope. Okay. We'll move on with our second proposal. Moving on to Kevin Duell or anyone else representing Northwest Natural, sorry. Apologies.
No problem. Yes, this is Kevin with Northwest Natural. And it's a proposal of several proposals, actually. So where shall I begin? I guess the additional measures. And let me say up front, none of these are based on modeling that we have performed. So, however, they are based on modeling others have performed. So take the first one, the additional measures required. The BCD has proposed that 2 measures be required. And I would say that we're in support of that. Just wanted to float the notion of going beyond that. And that's supported by the idea that each of those additional measures is worth between 3 to 6% savings. And that if the goal is to be 10% better than base code, then you might get there with 2 or get close with 2, but you'll certainly get there with 3. However, certainly flexible. And I realize some of these are mutually exclusive or interactive, and that you would need to actually, I think, model a home to determine if you're getting the appropriate savings, but that's not the goal of the prescriptive path. It's to provide a pathway that is not modeled. So that's really all I have to say about that portion. For the ERI numbers, again, just took a very simple approach. If the goal is about a 10% reduction from the base code, well, it would stand to reason you'd want to reduce the ERI score by 10%. Now, as Mark has pointed out, it's not quite that simple, because the REACH code's goal is actually to focus on regulated loads, not all of the loads. So that complicates that simple calculation. And again, certainly flexible on what those numbers should be. And I know there've been a number of proposals put out there, including one that's coming up. The IECC Appendix RG has ERI numbers in it as well. And on top of that, we are suggesting adding yet another additional compliance path. In this case, it would be the Energy Trust of Oregon's EPS program, which I believe is the Energy Performance Score. It's related to an ERI, but it's not directly the same. And that at first might strike you as proprietary or limited. That is to say that it only technically applies to houses within the Energy Trust of Oregon service territory, which is not the entire state. And that would be true if you're pursuing an incentive. However, you can apply the methodology and still get a score and not pursue the incentive. And part of the goal here is for those homes that are pursuing the EPS incentive, they would not have to go through 2 compliance paths to be recognized as compliant with the REACH code. And it's a proven methodology. The home that is built must be 10% more efficient than a typical home. And that seems on target with the goals of the REACH code. And I don't know for certain, but it would stand to reason that that 10% better would be a regulated load item, because we're talking about envelope or equipment efficiency measures. And that's my preamble, or my proposal that represented Northwest Natural.
Thank you, Kevin. So for the division, it looks like, are there people from Energy Trust on the line? So yeah, we wanted to clarify that the percentages and whether there were additional percentages or how the scores are given. So it wasn't clear to us that it would be 10%. That would be, sort of the starting point. So just would like a little feedback, I guess, maybe from folks at Energy Trust about what that might give for incentives for, and how that lines up, and what sort of incentives a home would get for that, for meeting that 10% level.
Hello, Mark. Don McCodrum here. Is there a question in there for Energy Trust to answer in this meeting?
Yes, sorry, excuse me. Mark Heiser with Division. Sorry to interrupt you. Yes, but the question would be, so what sort of, it kicks in at 10% better than code, and what you would see as code, and then throws in an additional, you get incentives at that point. And can you explain what maybe the basic incentives would be for that, if they were in Energy Trust territory seeking an EPS score?
Thanks, Mark. Well, unfortunately, we can't answer that question at this time. The program, the EPS program on behalf of Energy Trust of Oregon, is currently in the midst of measure development to adapt the program offer to reflect a baseline of the 2023 Oregon Residential Specialty Code. We are finalizing those baselines and the measure mixes that would exceed code by 10%. And then we'll be going through the exercise of calculating cost effectiveness and figuring out what measure packages can be incented, as well as the max incentives. And then we'll get into the program design side of what incentive mix we would offer in the fall, or at least in Q3. So unfortunately, I can't answer that particular question as it relates to the 2023 Oregon Residential Specialty Code, which would be which definitely this REACH code would be based on.
Thank you, Don. Mark Heiser again with the division. Are there other, I know that ETO has had in the past incentives for, like, was a different Energy Star program, or would there be considerations for ETO if there were and there's also a proposal for going passive house, anything that might be considered by Energy Trust if there were some sort of adoption for that while we have you on the line, since there's also consideration of other alternate paths, such as the DOE Energy Star, DOE EPA Energy Star, and DOE Zero Energy Ready Home.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mark. Don McCodrum here with Energy Trust of Oregon, EPS New Homes Program. I would say that once we complete our exercise of finalizing the modeling related to measure development, we could certainly look at the modeling assumptions of others for ZRH, Energy Star, Passive House, and do a side-by-side comparison with those against, and then figure out where a home that qualifies for those would come out at for builders. And I think that's a great exercise to do regardless, given 45L, and it's something that we want to be able to communicate to our builders. When it comes to looking at how that would apply to these discussions, I think that it would just be ideal if we could all be operating from the same sets of assumptions and model set points. So in the past, BCD, the Oregon Building Codes Division has shared their models for the 2023 Oregon Residential Specialty Code, so that there can be ultimate alignment, and it would be ideal that we all share similar model files, so that we're all on the same page for every detail that goes into these models, which can swing things in great directions. So that we, when we say, this is how much incentive we can provide for an Energy Star home, that it means the same thing to everyone.
Thank you very much for your testimony again, Mark Heiser, Division. So, any other comments or discussions at this point about the NIA proposal? Excuse me, Northwest Natural.
Hearing none, we will move on to the next public proposal. This proposal comes from NIA. So if Kevin Rose or anyone else representing NIA is here, you can please give us your proposal. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, this is Kevin Rose with Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, NEA. Our proposal is regarding the additional energy credits and very large homes. Simply, this new requirement is intended to introduce a new provision where homes over 5,000 square feet in conditioned floor area would be required to achieve one additional efficiency measure compared to other homes. I want to clarify up front, since we just had the proposal that Kevin Dwell just mentioned and others coming up that seek to make much broader and grander changes. This proposal is not meant to be mutually exclusive with that. Instead, it's meant to be something that could layer on to any other approach that more substantially and fundamentally changes how this code interacts, and the number of measures to be achieved and credits versus points. This is not intended to dissuade consideration of any others proposals. I'll mention that this concept of requiring larger structures to do more than smaller structures already exists in National Model Code, both in 90.1, which of course Oregon has here as their basis of their commercial code, and for the newest version of IACC 2024, something very similar to this provision is scheduled to be included in that code once it's finalized. So there's pretty good precedent for this concept, and the fundamental economics of being able to capitalize on economies of scale and do more with that. That's my proposal.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any comments or questions for Kevin? Yeah, Kevin Dwell, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Kevin Dwell, Northwest Natural. Just curious, I mean, this seems intuitive. I'm wondering if we have field data to indicate how much more energy a large home uses versus a standard home. I have some anecdotal data about this that it's particular to some homes in our region, or in our service area rather, that a bigger home is usually a custom home, and therefore the quality is much higher, tends to be more built tighter, and we found that the energy use is not that different than a standard home, strangely enough. There tend to be not that many more occupants. So the water consumption, I'm speculating at this point, the water consumption doesn't seem to be that much greater. And the envelopes tend to be better because they are custom. But I'm just curious if there's, again, that's anecdotal. So I would be curious to know if there's more field data indicating the differences.
Thank you, Kevin. So, from the division on home size, a lot of this came out of actually work by Oregon DEQ looking at smaller homes and the overall, not only energy use, but waste from a site and annual energy use and embodied carbon now has come into the picture as well. Is that, a smaller home, when we're talking in the, again, depending on the size, which hasn't been discussed yet, is that, they will use home for home, we'll use more, same 3-family or 5-person family in a 2,400 square foot prototype versus the 12 or 1,500 square foot home. We'll use measurably less energy, and it results in less waste, and it results in lower embodied carbon, since that is now part of our directive as well. One thing I wanted to ask the proponents and just the general group is that, yes, Washington still has, and this is something that came out of our residential board that will be looking at this, they were interested in what's needed for a small home, what's needed for the average home, and then potentially looking what's needed for a larger home. I was looking at some of the codes that have been mentioned. Washington does have a small reduced requirements for under 1,500 square feet. And New York stretch code, the current edition, has a breakpoint of all apartments and townhomes, and then any other dwelling unit under 1,800 square feet. They have sort of a dividing point at about 1,800 square feet, or where they have differences in requirements for what is done in a stretch in their stretch code in New York. But overall, the numbers that are coming out is to the group is there. If we're looking at less than 1%, maybe less than 0.5% of total homes of construction, is that any comments on that? And should there also be looking at, as we are considering looking at embodied carbon, do we look at what we do to encourage homes that are more appropriately sized? Just out to the group, Mark Heiser from the division asking if there are any comments or questions.
Yes, Kevin Rose, go ahead.
Yep. Kevin Rose with NIA again. On that topic of promoting more right-sized homes, if you will, I think it's worth acknowledging that there are many policy levers that can be used to promote that end. And you're seeing across the country, I think a lot of people attack one of the biggest ones, which is regarding zoning, and zoning that limits places to requiring basically only single family housing. And when you are dealing with zoning that requires that, and you have density limitations, you end up with economics leading people to naturally want to build as large a house as they can to try and maximize return on the piece of land that they have. So it's no surprise that homes have grown, even though household sizes have shrunk. But it's also an area that has been recognized, and that there is some policy action on outside of the building code arena. It's also worth stating that building codes and the energy code specifically, while it does increase cost, is one of the only things that directly returns and helps occupants not only afford their homes, but it helps them stay in their homes, and that's an important metric from a I would think from a policy perspective, not just to increase affordability of homes, but to keep an eye on people being able to stay in those homes and be able to ride out energy rate changes, major storms, and all of those things. So just wanted to highlight that there are lots of options beyond the energy code and building codes around promoting right-sized homes. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Jim, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, folks. Yeah, Jim Edelson, New Buildings Institute. Yeah, I was one of the facilitators of the negotiations in New York State on behalf of NYSERDA that led to that 1,800-foot demarcation. And it was the intent of the agency, the New York State Energy Research Development Agency, to reduce energy use in the new construction arena, and whether that was done through specific measures, through lower ERI, or through more intense efficiency in larger homes in order to leave each property per se with closer to the same energy consumption. That was certainly a consideration, and that was negotiated among a wide range of stakeholders and went out for 2 rounds of public comment. So I do believe it is a policy and objective of the state of Oregon to reduce energy consumption, and this precedent has been set in Colorado and in New York and other places. And so I would encourage you to look at looking at a size threshold. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. David Haslam, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. This is David Haslam with Earth Advantage and Zero Coalition. And yeah, I would just comment to support the upper level size threshold that NIA has proposed here, and to suggest it could be lowered without having seemingly real material impact on the market. As you pointed out, like in the Energy Trust data that was provided as part of the proposal, it was only 38 out of 24,830 homes were over 5,000 square feet. I believe Kevin suggested you could move it down to 3,500 and it would still be under 5% of those homes. Or even if you moved it down to 4,000 square feet, you would still be less than 1% of the homes constructed. So I think it's a good move to start with something like this that really doesn't have any impact on affordable housing, and then see about how it could be built on moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Are there any other comments or questions regarding any NIA's proposal? Seeing none, we will go right back to Mr. David Haslam regarding Zero Coalition's proposals, which are the next two proposals. The floor is yours, David.
Great, thank you. So we can start with the proposal based on Appendix RG from the 2024 IECC. So the intent of this proposal is to provide a alternate compliance pathway that doesn't require energy modeling. So this is similar, to our prescriptive base code in Oregon with our options table, except Appendix RG provides a more detailed options table where instead of having bundles of measures, there are individual measures with points associated with each individual measure, and then a minimum number of points is required. This makes it very similar to the code that's been in place in Washington State for many years, and actually goes back to a couple proposals from several code proposals ago that were made about modifying Oregon's code to use a points-based process. But now it's pulling from an IECC proposal, so it seems like it's on really firm footing since it's been through that process. And I would also point out that in that table, it has points associated for those measures being selected in climate zone 4 and a different set of points if you're in climate zone 5. So in general, I would categorize those as when it's about space heating, typically there are more points available for a measure if it's in zone 5 because there's a bigger heating load there as a portion of total regulated loads. And then if you're in zone 4, measures that would be based around more efficient water heating have more points associated with those than it would be if you were in zone 5. So that wanted to point out that would also introduce something new to the Oregon code in a prescriptive pathway like this, because there would be a differentiation based on your climate zone. And then while my name was on the proposal, Alex Butzel actually did most of the work on it. So I wanted to hand it off to him to provide a little more detail.
Thanks, David. Alex Butzel with Earth Advantage and Zero Coalition. Yeah, so just want to reiterate, this is an alternative pathway, prescriptive path. Again, what's interesting is the point system is weighted by energy efficiency. What's also interesting is that roughly 1 point equates to 1% increase in efficiency, which makes it really a convenient aspect to achieve a certain goal. So basically what we understand is, since we have a target with the 2029 code, the 60% reduction, a code like structure like this can allow to very accurately associate a certain efficiency with a code that would allow us, again, like looking forward to the 2026 base code, let us gain some experience in applying the IECC as an alternative pathway and associated points that might help us achieving that goal in 2029. So our proposal includes the base, meeting the base code, as well as selecting measures to equate to a total of 25 credits or points. And in our modeling, we feel like that would mimic what potentially a 2026 code would have to be to get us on track with equal increments to a 2029 code that meets the 60% reduction prescribed in 2004. It also introduces a size difference. Again, 5,000 square feet requires an additional 5%, 5 credits to be selected from that. And again, just to reiterate, like for example, a compact water design, would equate to 2 credits, whereas like a very high efficient heating system equates to 7, 8, or 9 points or credits. So more in line to what their actual model efficiency is. And there's rigorous modeling behind this by the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory that, as David was saying, provides codes based on climate zone. So we'll see like a more responsive code to those criteria and we feel like a more predictable outcome in terms of the efficiency that we're trying to achieve. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, David and Alex, both. Before we jump into the next Zero Coalition proposal, are there any questions or comments regarding the 2024 IEECC Appendix RG as an alternative compliance pathway proposal? Gary, I see your hands up. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm trying to get my video on, but it's not going on. Anyway, I guess you'll have to just stare at my name. Can you hear me okay? I should ask.
Yeah, you sound great. Thank you.
Okay. I was and continue to be on the IECC Residential Consensus Committee, so I did get a chance to review some of these. I do think, though, that there are a few issues that I see or differences. It does not look like the final version of Appendix RG. And maybe you've made some changes. That's fine, because I think conceptually this could work. But for example, you show not less than 25 credits required and 5 additional for 5,000 square feet. I believe that the final version of RG was 20 credits, not 25 credits. That's okay if you've done some math there to determine that 25 is a better number. So not so much of an issue there, other than to say there is a difference between what you show here and what I think is the final version of RG. And then I think there are some issues in the table, in the numbering and matching up with the actual options themselves. For example, one of your options here was an option for high performance gas furnace option 1, and you showed an NA not applicable or not available for climate. And yet that option 1, high performance gas furnace, is a 97% furnace. The very next option, option 2, you have an NA over in climate zone 5. That option, according to the list, should be a 95% furnace. So there's a number of issues there, I think, in lining up the table with the options, and something may have happened as you translated from one to the other. So I think somebody would need to get in here and rejigger the table to make sure it is accurate. So that's my major comments on this particular thing. Again, conceptually, I think it could work. But number one, need to determine if 25 is the right number. Just as for example, AHRI recently was contesting Appendix RG to the consensus committee because they found in climate zones 0, 1, 2, 3. I know that's not our climate zone. That they said that you would not be able to attain 20 credits without preemption issues with EPCA. So one of the things I think we would need to check, or somebody would need to check, is whether or not getting to 25 credits would be an issue. I think probably not. But in any case, I think the table and the measures, if this is going to be considered, need to be corrected because I think there's some mistakes there. Thank you.
Well, I can take that one because I made the table, not Alex. So that would be my that'd be my mistake if I made a mistake. And I transcribed everything, Gary, to the best of my ability directly from the IACC document. And I got rid of all those other climate zones, obviously, because they pertain to us. Or you would have seen a lot more not applicable, right? Because there's a lot of things that just aren't applicable across all climate zones. I believe, I didn't go look while you were talking to bring up the original document. I believe this is right. And it goes to like which option efficiency wise they thought was the applicable to the climate zone they're talking about. And so like they don't want the one available in the one climate zone. They only want it available in climate zone 5. And then the other one, they only want available in climate zone 4. So
well, I think, and not to interrupt though, but I think a lot of those discussions early on, or numbers early on, was maybe not making a 90% furnace available in some of the colder climate zones. But I believe that 95 and 97 certainly worthy of credits in 4 and 5. P&L's analysis would certainly support that. So I just think double checking, and I'm perfectly willing, David, to kind of work with you to double check if you'd like. I have a little PTSD from how many hours I spent transcribing this table, but I'm totally willing to go back because I could have transcribed stuff wrong. It was getting a little dizzy there at the end, but and then on the 20 versus 25 points. Totally, like, I mean, Alex and team, like they went through a bunch of modeling. Alex, you could explain better, but like went for 25 points because they thought that guaranteed us being more on the right trajectory for that 2029 goal that's Oregon specific, right? And that's why the points got changed. Yeah, and from my perspective, it was only pointing out the difference in RG right now. So I don't have a particular problem with 25 points.
Yeah, and if I may just build on that, again, like pointing out, thank you for Gary for pointing out the differences, and yeah, just to confirm, David's assumption, modeling basically prompted us to adjust the minimum credits from 20 to 25 to be on the trajectory for the goal, and we will certainly review the table and make corrections if we make mistakes. I think though what the interesting one is that what this makes it, this is a testament to the conversation around IACC because of the involvement of some, many stakeholders that it's quickly and easily can be applied to a state like Oregon, and the discussion is fundamentally on the concept behind it, and we can agree that the rigor behind these tables is there. And so I think it's a really interesting approach to include the IACC, or in this case, Appendix IG in the REACH code as an option. And then the one thing I think in terms of APCA, like I might be wrong in this legally, but since it's a voluntary code, I'm assuming there would be no conflict with APCA. But yeah, we can confirm that too and provide that information as well.
Yeah, well, none of us are lawyers, so I'm not going to state definitively one way or the other. Yeah. And I think there probably isn't, so.
And you, just one quick area for some clarification, just that we want to make sure we have this right, is that this is looking at providing the 2024 IECC with the additional measure tables as a path setting 20, 25, whatever, as the additional number of credits under the appendix RG.
That's correct.
Okay.
Again, Alex with Earth Advantage Zero Coalition, that's correct.
Alex and David, I do have one quick question is, we've been looking into the cost analysis for these. It looks like the cost differences, we're comparing the 2024 IECC baseline envelope for cost differences. It doesn't appear that was done relative to our current code, because the walls in 2021 IECC has R60 roof, R20 plus R5 walls. Just comparing that and the same analysis you did for the passive house. Just wanted to know which code you were comparing the baseline costs to.
Yeah, so there is the baseline for the 24 ICC differs from the 2023 Oregon base code. And because we're including the appendix RG, so they are required additional measures. Overall, it will be resulting in a more stringent code than the base code, Oregon base code, even though that the baseline, for example, the R values required for ceilings and roofs is going to be lower. Because of these additional measures, we can reach higher performance than the base code, like the Oregon base code right now. That's just because the nature of the two different codes. But as a result, I think we would get the outcome that we wanted with a reach code proposal. Did I answer the question?
So the costs that were input, you have measure input item on your cost analysis had an R70 ceiling for the base building, R30 plus R5 continuous insulation, and then an R38 floor. And those costs don't appear to be consistent with a change relative to Oregon's code, because in your passive house one using R38 walls, R69 ceiling, and an R20 slab, there's a difference between fairly similar envelopes of about $42,000 of difference for about the same work. So we're just wondering, it looks like the passive house was done as a comparison to our code, whereas the costs that are input on the RG proposal were relative to the IECC. So
that was not our intention, but I'm more than happy to verify that and get back to you, like whether that has been done correctly.
thank you.
Thank you. I see Jim's hand up. Please go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, hi there. Now I realize I'm in the next office over from Alex. So hi, Alex. Yeah, so I fully support this proposal. I think since there have been the annexes or the appendices to the IECC, the intent was for these to be adopted by state and local jurisdictions as they see fit. And I think the REACH code is absolutely the right vehicle. In terms of the EPCA issue, having followed this issue for over 15 years, the nature of the REACH code as a voluntary adoption and not being under state law mandatory within any jurisdiction, I do not believe it would be ripe for any type of violation of federal statute if it code. And the last item I would like to bring up is the demand response measure of 1 point at the end. MBI's position is that potentially that is not an energy efficiency measure. That is an energy shifting measure, even though it provides value to the grid. And in itself, it's a valuable measure. It does require potentially a utility program to utilize the thermostat. But I think the division should look at whether that meets its intent of reducing energy, per the executive order. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions or comments regarding the Appendix RG proposal? Hearing none, I will go back to Mr. David Haslam with Zero Coalition regarding their second proposal.
Great, thank you very much. So the second proposal is it's pretty clear cut. I think it would be adding passive house certification using the FIAS standard, Passive House Institute United States, as a alternate compliance pathway. And for some folks here who might have been part of the original REACH code process in Oregon, it might be a little deja vu because there was a lot of passive house conversation back then. At this point, the passive house program has been much more streamlined for use in the United States in terms of putting into alignment with the same protocols that are used for things like Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Home. So again, Alex and his team did most of the analysis on this. So I'll hand off to him to point out the details, but the savings associated with this are even deeper savings as compared to our other proposal or any other proposal that's been talked about today. So I think in terms of if this were to be added as an alternate pathway, it would clearly have cleared the bar that any of the other proposals have cleared, and then some. But Alex, I'll let you provide more detail.
Yeah, what's interesting about this proposal is that it builds on some of the federal certification standard like Energy Star and DOE Zero Energy Ready Homes. So those are required for the FIA certification, which means that like the incentives would be unlocked by pursuing that certification. Again, it's a performance path. It's definitely the savings are much more, much deeper. As David was mentioning, very closer to the 40% savings. And but we feel like it's an interesting proposal. We'll see passive certification in other states as part of a stretch code, and successfully adopted in some jurisdictions down to any project over 12,000 square feet is required to follow this. And we'll just feel like it would be again, using the REACH code as a test bed for future codes. It seems interesting to propose this. We have more and more interest in the state at the certification. So we would also streamline the permitting or the permitting process, because we would have certification in hand that would allow building officials to assert compliance with the REACH code. Yeah, I think that's probably all I have to add right now. I'm again happy to answer questions.
Thank you, David and Alex. We will now take any discussion, questions, comments on this proposal.
Alex and David, Mark Heiser with Division. Just a real quick piece about the, I noted that it said, yes, do Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Home and the IAQ Plus program. I believe that the Zero Energy Ready Home program requires you to get Energy Star and IAQ Plus, so that seems a little redundant in there. Would that, just if language were cleared up, just to say, it sounds like, you'd pay, there's an EPA certifier for one, there's DOE certifier for another, that it's really getting what's required by zero energy ready home, and then the additional things for passive house.
Alex, I'll pose the question to you. I can't remember, did Zero Energy Ready Home, did they still have the Indoor Air Plus, or did they just take a few measures from Indoor Air Plus and that's what's in Zero Energy Ready Home? Is that the difference, or I can't remember exactly.
Indoor Air Plus is not required for DOE zero energy homes. There is a water sense measure there. Yeah, so those are additional requirements for that certification. It's I wasn't sure, Mark, your question, but essentially we're aware that FEOC certification would exceed the DOE energy zero ready home standard, but included. So we just wanted to point out that this as an additional alternative pathway to meet REACH code would also meet the intent, or the intention to unlock incentives, that would incentivize builders to follow this pathway.
So then just a follow-up question, Mark Heiser, division, then the actual passive house certification doesn't ask you to do this, correct?
It does.
Passive house, they don't
yeah.
have your Energy Star, energy, your energy ready home, and the IAQ plus, but they have equivalents more or less.
No, they
do.
FEOC requires it.
All three in their language? Okay, thank you. Just, that was the main issue I wanted to get clarified. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Kevin Duell's hand up. Please go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin Dwell with Northwest Natural. Was just looking at a summary of the Zero Energy Ready Home version 2, revision 1, and they do list one of the mandatory requirements is that it's certified under EPA Indoor Air Plus. So I think we're covered for that, for the version we're talking about here.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any other comments, questions, anything regarding this proposal? Seeing none, that concludes the proposal portion of this for our topic. I'll be moving forward, but if anyone, feel free to interrupt me if there's any questions regarding any of the proposals we just discussed today. Moving on, we are going to discuss some fiscal and economic impacts as required. I know we've talked today a lot about cost differences, savings, incentives, anticipated costs, but I would like to just keep this topic open to discuss, other potential fiscal or economic impacts. If there's any additional cost increases, any requirements, I would like to open this discussion now. And as I said, if there's any questions you had regarding the proposal we just discussed that aren't fiscal related, you can still bring those up. So feel free. Thank you. Okay, hearing none, we can move on to the next topic. And again, for the record, Pierre Sabah, policy analyst for the division. Topic 3 is what are the potential impacts on racial equity in the state? With any rulemaking, the division is required to make particular note of any potential impact on racial equity in the state that might result from new rules. So the division will welcome any input from the committee on the nature and extent of any impact this rule may have on racial equity in Oregon. Thank you. Okay, hearing none, we can move forward again. This is time for any additional topics to discuss from anyone today for this rulemaking advisory committee. Any additional issues that we haven't discussed can be brought up. It's also, again, an opportunity for to return to anything we've talked about regarding these proposals today. So if anyone would like to speak up, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Kevin Dwell at Northwest Natural. Just wanted to thank all the proponents for these proposals. These are really robust and obviously well thought through, and there's obviously a lot of work behind them. So it's great to see that that commitment to advancing codes.
Thank you, Kevin. Seeing no one else, I will move forward. Again, for the record, this is Pierre Sabah, Policy Analyst with the Division, and I'm just going to discuss some next steps for this. We are going to hold a written comment period until Friday, February 9th at end of day, 5 p.m. So if there's any other written comments you'd like to submit, you can submit to our rules coordinator email, which I think our team will provide in the comments. Feel free to send any other additional information to that email again until February 9th, which is a Friday at 5 p.m. Moving on, after today, the division will take this feedback and go over its proposed residential reach code. The division anticipates bringing the proposed code provisions to the residential reach code and manufactured structures board, residential and manufactured structured board to make a final recommendation for adoption, and that board will take place on April 3rd, 2024. Afterward, the division anticipates holding a public rulemaking hearing where interested parties can provide testimony about the proposed code provisions in June of 2024. That same month, we will also take the proposed code provisions to the Construction Industry Energy Board for their review. And we anticipate an effective date of July 1, 2024 for the 2023 Oregon Residential Reach Code. And with that, that concludes our meeting today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for all the proponents that brought their proposals forward. Everyone have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for convening this.